The man in the corner hadn't touched his drink in 20 minutes. Nobody noticed. That was the point. It was a Tuesday night in November 1976, and the Cartwright was the kind of place London kept a quiet secret about. A basement club on a narrow Soho street. 40 seats, low ceilings, lights dimmed to almost nothing. The kind of room where cigarette smoke had soaked into the walls so deeply that even on closed nights you could still smell it. Just a hand-painted chalkboard that said "Open Mic," Tuesdays, and a staircase that went down. The man in the corner wore a plain jacket and a wool cap pulled low. His companion, half buried under a scarf, kept stealing glances at the stage and muttering things that made the capped man smile faintly. They had come for the music, nothing else. The man running the night was named Colin Marsh, 41 years old, and he looked every year of it. He had been a session guitarist once. Decent work, a few years of genuinely believing he was heading somewhere. Then somewhere stopped coming. The sessions dried up, the calls slowed, and Colin ended up here, behind a microphone in a basement club, 3 nights a week, deciding who deserved to be heard. That night he had already dismissed 2 performers, a young woman who forgot her lyrics 2 bars in, a middle-aged man with a 12-string who played too slowly. Colin had stopped them both mid-song, not harshly. Worse than that, with a kind of cheerful indifference, as if their embarrassment was simply part of the evening's furniture. He never stayed to watch them walk back to their seats. He was already scanning the room for whoever came next. Danny came up third. His jacket was too big for him, clearly borrowed. He carried a battered Telecaster with a crack along the body that had been taped rather than properly repaired. The kind of repair that says, "I can't afford to fix this, but I refuse to stop playing." He sat on the stool, adjusted the microphone without looking at the crowd, and began. He kept his eyes down. Not from shyness, from concentration. He wasn't playing for the room. He was playing for the song. The piece was instrumental. No words. That was the first thing the room noticed. The second was that it wasn't a cover. This was something written by this boy in the borrowed jacket. Something that had come out of him rather than been learned. It was quiet at first, searching. The notes moved slowly, finding their way like a person walking through a dark room. And then, gradually, it began to open up. A woman at a table near the front set down her glass and didn't pick it up again. In the back corner, the man in the wool cap went very still. His fingers, resting loosely on the edge of the table, stopped moving. Colin let it go for 90 seconds, maybe a little more. Then he tapped the microphone stand twice, a signal the regulars knew, and said in a flat, almost bored voice, "Okay, thank you." Danny's fingers stopped. He looked up. "This is a music club," Colin said. "Not a therapy session." The room shifted. Not loudly, just a collective tightening, the way a room does when something has gone slightly wrong and nobody's certain yet how wrong. Danny said nothing. He looked at Colin for a moment. Not anger, not humiliation. Something quieter than both. He moved to set the Telecaster aside. That was when the chair scraped back from the corner table. The man in the scarf stood up slowly. He didn't raise his voice. "Let him finish." 2 words, flat and certain. Colin's smirk held for a moment. Then, almost imperceptibly, it shifted. Colin squinted toward the back. One man still seated, cap pulled low. The other standing with arms loose at his sides. "And who exactly are you to tell me how I run my night?" "That's not the important question," the standing man said. "The important question is who's sitting next to me." Something in the room changed, not dramatically, more like a shift in air pressure, the kind you feel a moment before you understand it. The man in the wool cap hadn't moved. His fingers had returned to the table edge, moving again, slowly, almost unconsciously, like a man who cannot entirely stop the music even when he's sitting still. "Rod Stewart." A woman near the bar said it out loud, barely above a whisper, then again, louder. "That's Rod Stewart." The room tilted. Rod Stewart was standing in the back corner of a 40-seat basement club in Soho on a Tuesday night, telling Colin Marsh to let a kid in a borrowed jacket finish his song. "And the other one," someone said. "The one with the cap, who is—" The man in the cap looked up. He lifted it slightly, tilted his face toward the light for just a moment, then set it back down. That was all he did, but it was enough. The face that caught the light belonged to a man that every serious guitarist in that room would have recognized anywhere. Lean, dark, watchful eyes. The particular stillness of someone who has spent decades listening to sounds most people haven't heard yet, and the hands, even resting on the edge of a table in a dim basement club. Those hands. Jeff Beck. The name moved through the room without being spoken. It moved the way a current moves. Underneath, invisible, felt before it's understood. Jeff Beck sitting in the corner of the Cartwright, watching a 22-year-old boy get cut off in the middle of his own song. Colin Marsh stood at the microphone and felt the floor shift beneath him. He opened his mouth, closed it. The practiced confidence that had carried him through 100 Tuesday nights had simply left the building. He looked down at the microphone in his hand. He'd held it 1,000 times. Tonight it felt like something borrowed. Rod Stewart looked at him evenly, said nothing more. Colin stepped back from the microphone. He didn't say go ahead. He didn't say anything at all. He stepped back, and that 2 feet of empty stage was the only permission Danny needed. Danny set his fingers back to the strings. He played from the beginning, not because he had to, because he needed to. 40 people, none of them breathing quite normally. The bartender had stopped wiping glasses. A man near the door who had been reaching for his coat had turned back around. Danny played the piece all the way through. The music was the same as it had always been. Quiet at first, searching, then something else. Something that grew from the inside out. A melody that felt like it was still being discovered even as it was played. That sense of finding, of not yet knowing where you'd end up, wasn't a flaw in his technique. It was the whole point. The piece had been written for his father, who had lost 2 fingers in a machine press at a Southampton shipyard and had not touched the guitar in the hallway since. 3 years of watching it hang silent had become this. These notes, this searching, this thing without words because there were no words for it. Nobody in the room knew any of that. And yet somewhere in the last 2 minutes, the room had stopped being 40 separate people and had become something else, a single held breath. In the back corner, Jeff Beck was completely still. He was listening the way certain people listen, with his whole body, not just his ears. The way you listen when something has reached you before you've decided whether to let it. When Danny played the final phrase, the one that didn't resolve, that ended on an open note and simply stopped, like a sentence that trails off rather than ends. The room held its silence for a full breath before the applause came. It wasn't thunderous. It was the applause of people who had just heard something real, which is rarer and quieter than most people expect. Danny set the guitar down across his knees and looked at the floor. Jeff Beck stood up. He didn't say anything. He pulled on his jacket and picked up the worn case beside his chair. He had been sitting quietly in the back, just listening, for 2 hours. He walked toward the stage with the unhurried movement of a man who has never needed to rush. Colin Marsh went completely rigid. The room watched him cross the floor in complete silence. Nobody spoke. Nobody reached for their drink. Even the sound of the street above seemed to have stopped. Jeff Beck stepped up onto the stage. He nodded once at Danny, just once, nothing performed in it, and set his case on the edge of the boards. He unlatched it, plugged in, adjusted the amp with 2 small turns, stood still for a moment, then he played. What came out of that small amplifier is difficult to describe without making it sound like mythology, which is exactly what it wasn't. It was precise, controlled, warm in the particular way that only certain playing is warm, not because it's loud, but because it's exact. Every note placed exactly where it belongs. Nothing wasted. Everything that reaches you was intended to reach you. At some point, it stopped feeling like something being played and started feeling like something being said. He played for 4 minutes. No announcement, no introduction. When he finished, he let the final note sustain until it faded by itself. Then he turned to Danny. "The last note," he said quietly. "Take it further next time." That was all. He closed the case, looked once at Rod Stewart, who was already moving toward the door, and they left. The room took approximately 10 seconds to find itself again. Then it came apart, not like a concert, like a room where something impossible has just occurred on a very ordinary night. Danny sat on the stool with the Telecaster across his knees and looked at the door that had just closed. He was smiling, faintly, without knowing he was doing it. Nobody went over to him. That felt right. Some moments close around themselves, and the kindest thing you can do is leave them alone. Colin Marsh stood at the edge of the stage and did not move for a long time. He told the story 23 years later. A short interview. A journalist asking about memorable nights. He told it straight. No embellishment. The Tuesday night. Danny. What he'd said. The two men in the corner. He played for 4 minutes, Colin said. And when he finished, he turned to the boy. Said 2 words, just 2. He stopped. 2 words. Then he walked out. The journalist waited. I spent 30 years telling people what was wrong with their playing, Colin said. 30 years. And I could not tell you a single specific thing I ever said to any of them. A pause. But I remember those 2 words exactly, every single one. He didn't say what they were. He didn't need to. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needed to hear it today. And if you want more moments like this one, subscribe. There are more nights like the Cartwright, more rooms where nobody knew what was about to walk through the door. We'll be here when the next one is ready.